Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to this Resurgence Talk with Manchán Magan, who will be speaking about listening to the land speak, the wisdom encoded in our law, language, and landscape. We're so grateful to him for joining us today and are really looking forward to this talk and Q&A. My name is Georgie Gilmore and I'll be facilitating tonight's event. And we'd like to thank all of you who are joining us here today and anyone who made any donations when booking on. Donations help us to keep these events free. So if you'd like to, you still can donate. Manchán will be answering your questions after his talk. So please do submit your questions at any point during his talk using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. This event is being recorded for those that can't join us live. We want to say a big thank you to the sponsors of these talks, Fattoria La Viella, which is a family-run organic biodynamic farm and wine estate. So let me begin introducing tonight's speaker, Manchán Magan, who explores the knowledge and insights preserved by the ancestors within Irish culture and heritage. He offers new insights into the mythology, place names, ritual sites, proverbs, and language of Ireland. And he presents the Almanac of Ireland podcast. He has made dozens of documentaries on issues of world culture, and his incredible books include 32 Words for Field and Listen to the Land Speak. So, Manchán, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you so much, Georgie. It's so lovely to be here. And I'm in such a funny position because I suddenly found out I had to come into hospital for an operation 2 days ago. And so I'm meant to be in a hospital gown, but I took that off and took the oxygen out to give this talk. I should have kept it on for sympathy purposes, but I am in the day room. And actually, I might have to leave this day room and go back to my bed, but we'll work all of it out. Nothing can stop what's happening at the moment. Like, it's such an honor to be able to talk to the Resurgence magazine, Resurgence Trust, because what is happening in Ireland is basically a resurgence. There is this reconnection to the land, to the goddess of the land, that has been dormant, has been quiet for centuries, possibly millennia, and it's rising in so many different ways. And of course, this is not unique to Ireland. This has been slowly bubbling up all over the world, but there's something really exciting in Ireland. And I want to try and see, can I compact that, give you a compact vision of that in the 30 minutes, even if I have to run around the hospital and find quiet places to do so. So I think the first thing we should start with is just the idea of Ireland, the name Ireland, yeah? So, like, it's from Eir's land. So Eire was a goddess, and the Vikings came in the 8th, 9th century, and they had land, and they had apostrophe S, Eire, apostrophe S, land. That's where we get Ireland. Eire is a goddess, and she's a goddess of brightness from the south, but she's actually a goddess of fertility. So it's said that the Héireann, the word is actually from Héireann, which is an Indo-European word. You know, the language that was spoken all over Europe, all over Western Asia, all in Ireland too, that gave rise to most of the European languages. And Héireann means pregnant or fertile or life. So in the same way as, like, you go to an Aboriginal country and often it's Bujar is the word, particularly in Western Australia, the Noongar language, they will use Bujar, which also means pregnant. So the land is this fertile force that is pregnant with being. And it's said that Ireland was fostered, was looked after by Cuddle the round-breasted. So this is our creation myth, as it were. Now, Cuddle is the Irish for cuttlefish. So like a squid in Irish is Cuddle Meire, basically a fingered cuttlefish. The Irish language has this gorgeous way of looking at nature like a child would, not like a biologist or a botanist, but actually like a child. So like the Irish for a bat is Scián Lahar, leather wings, or the Irish for a spider is Dawanala, Dawanala, little ox of the wall. So they have this gorgeous way of looking at nature and describing what it is. So let's say Cuddle Meire is a squid because it's a cuttlefish with fingers. But it's interesting, if Éireann, the goddess, was nurtured and fostered by Cuddle the round-breasted, the one thing we know about squid and cuttlefish is they're shapeshifters. You know, they can change their color, their shape at any time. So what we're being told is that Ireland was this goddess. She was this pregnant, ebullient life force who was descended from this ultimate shapeshifter, from basically someone who could transform atoms or essence to being, to physical being. Now, that's one of the creation myths. There are many others. There's another one that these three people, or a small group of people, arrived in Ireland, and one was Adra, which means the ancient, and Kezar, which was the first woman, and they were the son of Be. And Be still today in modern Irish means everything. It means all things. It means the cosmos. So again, we're being told that Ireland was summoned out of the cosmos by these ancient beings who came and settled on the land. And there's actually three names for Ireland. There was Éire, Banba, and Fola. So if you had come to Ireland 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, even 2,000 years ago, you would have said this was the land of Éire, the land of Fola, the land of Banba. These were three goddesses. And Banba is particularly interesting because Banba means the goddess, it means the land that is under the water that has not yet emerged from the water, but that some bits of it are above the water. So basically, it's a summation of the fact that Ireland, for thousands of years, was buried, millions of years, was actually buried under this 1 kilometer, sheet of ice. So, where there was people in Britain 20,000 years ago, Ireland had no one on it. For 10,000 years ago, while there was people down in Cornwall and Devon looking across, we were just this ice sheet. And that is encoded within this myth of Banba, connected to Éire, connected to Fola. So there's an awful lot in that. And then we get even a sense of who the very first person to arrive in Ireland was. It was a man, which is interesting. I'd imagine this was it was a man, it was a druid, a poet who summoned the land into being. What I would imagine, this was originally a female. It was actually a woman poetess, but that was changed by some of the patriarchal tribes who came later. And so we know what this man, Amergen, said. He arrived in Ireland and he summoned the land into being. And he goes, Am Gwe, am Wil, I'm the wind on the sea. Am Dav Shach Nirand, I'm a stag of 7 tines. Am Tun Trehen, I am the strong wave. I'm Shegar Isle, I'm a hawk on the cliff. I'm Jor Graina, I'm a teardrop of the sun. Basically, he lists every single manifestation, every single element that knits the world into life, into being. So we have this strong sense from the various creation myths that Ireland was this goddess energy. It was this powerful being that summoned itself out of the cosmos. And how today in the 21st century do we still have that lore? Well, 2 different ways. First, thanks to the Christian church, St. Patrick arrives in 437 AD, and with him comes scribes and writing, and they set up scriptoria and all the great monasteries in Ireland, really, a bit later. He comes in the 5th century. By the 8th, 9th, 10th century, they had these big monasteries, big scriptoria, and for some ridiculous reason, they decided to write every element of our folk, of our oral culture alive. So every single piece of knowledge that had been brought from generation to generation. But that word actually means from knee to knee. So from grandparents' knee to grandchild's knee, grandchild's knee to grandparents' knee to grandchild's knee, all the way down for thousands of years. So that in fact I could give you examples, numerous examples in Irish mythology that refer to these great waves that happened as the glacial ice sheet began to melt 10, 11, 12,000 years ago, and the torrents of water washed up the land, and the first settlers, who weren't us in any form of DNA, they were the hunter-gatherer people with dark, dark skin and blue, blue eyes. But somehow their arrival has been recorded within our mythology, within the language we're still speaking, on Gaelga, the Irish language, despite the fact despite the fact that, in fact, we're only speaking this language, this Celtic Gaelic language in Ireland for 2.5, maybe 3,000 years. But somehow the myth was stronger than the language. The story the myth was conveyed through the language to us, to the monks, as I say, in the 9th, 10th, 12th, 13th century, and they recorded it, but not just there. Also, it was kept alive in one particular place along the west coast of Ireland, in the Gaeltachts, the Irish-speaking places, in Donegal, in Connemara, in Kerry. And there were the areas that the colonizers, since the Christians arrived, and then the Vikings in the 9th century, then the Normans in the 12th century, then the English, all of them tried to push Gaelic culture alive and all that encoded myth and all that remembered knowledge to push it. But they pushed it westwards and westwards, just like in Scotland and Wales, and it remained in these little pockets. So we have the old story, the old Shanachas, the old Béalindus, the old oral literature in these Irish-speaking places and in the old manuscripts. So it means we have two different places. And it just shows those Irish-speaking Gaeltachts are such valuable places to us. Like in the last few years, last year, I was doing a project of collecting up women's words, words to do with the vagina, the vulva, to Irish bodies, because so many of these actually are still encoded in the Gaeltacht and aren't to be found elsewhere. There's people coming in now, so I might have to move off. You're all attacking this room now. Shall I move? Okay, okay, I'm going. Told you this might happen. So, yeah. So, when we start speaking English in a place, we are weakening a language and a sort of encoded knowledge that is actually very, very rare. And so that's the folklore element. But what about, sorry, the light might get bad here. We'll settle down here. What about the archaeology? Like, what is the archaeology telling us about this ancient knowledge we have? And I suppose the main things when you think about archaeology in Ireland, if you have any sense of it, you think of Newgrange. Newgrange is this passage tomb or a ritual site that is. I'll just check in. Georgie, you can still hear me and see me okay, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, so Newgrange is this, circular ritual, often called a passage grave, on top of the hill, or well, on top of along the Boyne River in Ireland. But in fact, all over Ireland, there are these passage tombs. And passage tomb is the wrong word for them, because really they are ceremonial sites, ritual sites. And mostly they're on top of the mountains, and mostly they're in the form of cairns, which is a heap of stones covering a sacred chamber within. So often that chamber will just be a dolmen, it can be 3 or 5 or 7 stones with a secret nexus, temple, chamber within it, or it can be as developed as Newgrange, where it becomes a long passage grave with sometimes many different altars on either side of it, and then the stones covering it. One of the best examples for me is the one right beside where I live in Westmeath, and it's called Sliabh na Cailí. Sliabh na Cailí means the hill of the witches. And so it's this big stone, a heap on 2 actually hills, on big, both of them look like breasts with the heap look like nipples on top. And in it is an entranceway into this secret chamber. What happens is twice a year, at either the solstice or the equinox, the sun, the rising sun or the falling sun, will run down that entranceway into the center of the mountain, and will basically warm or enliven or spark the womb that's in the center of the hill. So what do we see from that? We see that there was a sense of our Neolithic ancestors. These, again, are not us. I have Bronze Age DNA in me. Basically, I've been here for 4,500 years. But these passage tombs that I'm talking about were built by the people who came before us, 6,000 years ago. They're not us. But to all the world, if we have these womb-like spaces on top of hills with this vulva or vagina-like entranceway, labia-like entranceway, and then the sun, and in most cultures, the sun is a male god. It was in Ireland too. Almost all cultures except Aboriginal Australia. The sun is a female. There's some accounts actually of the sun being a female as well. Grian is the word for sun in Irish, and it's also a goddess. That's another point to pick apart. So we have the male sun sending its phallus, sending its sunbeam down the passageway of this female mountain of the land, and warming or igniting the temple right at the chamber, right in the center. And then there will be rock art, in the form of spirals, in the form of geometric shapes that are hard to decipher at the back of this chamber. And so once or twice a year, these will be illuminated and cast a light. So again, when we see the male god sending his phallus into the goddess. So again, what we see from that is the people who came before us clearly had the same idea. The land was a goddess. And the strongest element of that is in live today is probably in the version of that word Cailleach. Remember I said it was called, so Newgrange and Nath and Douth. They are the most famous passage tombs because they're on the Boyne River and they have the most elaborate and beautiful artwork connected to them. The one I'm talking about it's probably about 40 kilometers away from there, and it's beside me, and it's called Sliabh na Cailí, the hill of the Cailleach, the witch. Now, Cailleach is so much more than witch. Cailleach means she's basically the goddess. She's basically the land sovereignty goddess. And we have words from her, like these encoded words, these recorded words, where she says, I am older than everything. I am older than the rocks. I'm older than the sea. I'm older than the land. She says, one side, Ur va misha og. Once when I was young, the unfariga in a creel knickach glas. The ocean was basically in a glass, a hilly grass forest. So basically what she's saying is she's pre-Pangea. She's pre the creation of the Atlantic Ocean. And what she says, when she was young and all powerful, every single man, every single king, every single male entity had to bow down before her. She had absolute power. She had absolute sovereignty. And she is still a vivid force in Ireland today. So when I stand on the hilltop beside me, Loch Crew or Sliabh McCallig in the hill of the goddess, I look 50 kilometers to the north of me, or 50 miles to the north of me, and right directly in a linear alignment from the top of that cairn of this womb of this women's citadel, I look up at Sliabh Gulliam in the north of Ireland, and there's another Cailleach Beara's house, another cairn which is also connected to Cailleach Beara. And then I look directly southwest of me, and I get to Ishnach. And Ishnach is the sacred umbilical cord of Ireland, and it is where it's basically the navel of Ireland. And there is this stone on it called Isle na Mirren, which is the rock that connects all the different dimensions together. In other words, connects the underground, the real world, and the world above us. All are connected to that, and that is direct alignment with Loch Crew, and then 100 miles away to the north, Sliabh Gulliam. Like the land is basically trying to talk to us, trying to tell us that it is a sacred force, that it is this powerful entity, and that it wants to come alive again. And still today, like if you're in Donegal, up in the Donegal Gaeltacht, and two women meet on the streets, they say, oh, well a Cailleach, how are you Cailleach? How are you hag? How are you wise woman? How are you witch? And witch has such dark connotations now. This is Cailleach is from a time where women were in their realm. Women were deeply connected to the waters, to the land, to the rocks, to the rivers. And I suppose the clearest way you see this is that every single river in Ireland has a female name in Irish. So there's the Irish language is either female, feminine or masculine words. Every single one is feminine, except two. Well, maybe one. On Toulon down in Cork, which means the miserable, insignificant river, and then the Foyle in Derry. But I think Foyle is to do with estrus. It's actually to do with women's processes as well, and women's fertility. So really, there's only one. And so many of the rivers are actually named goddess itself. So the Ban, the Bandon, the Boyne, they're all just goddess. The Shannon, the greatest river in Ireland and Britain, is Shunna. It's this young goddess who decides to go on a journey of enlightenment. She decides to expand herself, to try and find her power so that she can communicate that power to other people, the wisdom inside, just like Siddhartha does. In so many other cultures in the world, it's about male gods. In Ireland, it's all about female. So the young Shunna goes on this journey to get wisdom. And where does she go? She goes to the pure water. She goes to the pure source of water, the well, a holy well called Cunla, a sacred well called Cunla's Well, that's out off the coast of Cork and Kerry. It's beneath the ocean, and it bubbles with lifeblood, with wisdom, with knowledge. And she gets her wisdom. And the story says that when she gets wisdom, when she gains enlightenment and gains the ability to communicate that enlightenment with other people, the water rises up and drowns her. Now, either that was added later by some patriarchal figure, by the monks, or by the male druids, or by someone, just to stop uppity women thinking that they can have the power and do different things. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe that is trying to convey that actually life and death are not the most important thing. Once Shunna, the young goddess, gets enlightened, she dies and her body becomes the river, becomes this life force that nourishes the land, that nourishes the people, that nourishes the wildlife. It's a vision beyond this narrow view we have of life and death in Ireland. And the second other great river in Ireland is the one beside where I live. It's the Boyne River. The Boyne River is, the Irish for that is Bowen or Bowinda. means cow. Finn means white or pale. But really it doesn't. Finn in that sense. So Finn McCool is our great warrior, fair-haired Finn. But Finn actually means being able to see through the veil to access the other dimensions, not being stopped or locked in this world, but being able to see the magic, the wonder, the unlimited supernatural dimensions all around us. So Bowen, the name of this river, basically means the cow who can access the knowledge and the wisdom beyond the realms, the other sides. And that Boinda is the exact same god or goddess or god, the deity that you find in India, known as Govinda. So it's Bowen or Boinda in Ireland. It's Govinda in India. So Go is a Sanskrit for bow. Bow in Irish, go Sanskrit, same word. Vinda, it means finder or seeker of knowledge in Sanskrit and Hindi, just like but Inda means knowledge and wisdom in Ireland, or like being able to seek and access that knowledge. So, like, why would we in Ireland have the same God that they have over there in India, the far, far, across the continent? It's because what you get in Ireland is some of these remnants of that Indo-European culture that once was throughout Western Asia and Europe, but has been mixed up into so many other ideas in the melting pot of everything between Ireland and India that you sort of don't see such clear elements of this pre-patriarchy, somewhat matriarchal culture that existed at the time. Really, I suppose, it was a culture that existed at the beginnings of farming, and farming was still rural, and women did have control. It seems like when we got Bronze Age, when we got Iron Age particularly, the male, when we had tools and weapons, the power of the men rose. So you can imagine it as almost Ireland and India are like, let's say you dropped a pebble into the middle of a pond and the ripples radiating out, circle all the way to the end of the pool. Ireland and India are on that same ring. So I'm in November this year, I'm going to bring out a new book just about all those ridiculous amount of similarities there are between Ireland and India, and this powerful sense of the goddess, of the land being fertile, being strong. So whenever you come across not only the rivers sacred in Ireland and alive, and not only are we beginning to realize their power and their potency, but the holy wells too, just because so many, by the Boyne River and the Shannon, their birth story says they came out of a sacred well. And so whether you are talking with Aboriginal people in Australia or Native American people down in Arizona, they'll all tell you how it's the water sources, they're the most important thing. They are the givers of life. They are where the female entity exists. Unfortunately, Ireland still has that sensibility. We're just about holding on to it. So we have more holy wells than any other country in the world, and not per capita. Just in total, like we have 3.5 or almost 4,000 wells. In fact, there's more being found the whole time. Because somehow, despite the fact St. Patrick came in the 5th century, we managed to hold on to this sense that there was this power beneath Christianity. There was a power in the land, and that power, the best way of describing that was the power that was in the water that animated the land, the trees, the people. And I know I'm not going to have much more time to talk to you, but the other thing I want to talk about is the trees themselves. So in Ireland, there's a concept called the billa. Billa means sacred tree. Now, it's a concept that's almost been forgotten about now, and I'll tell you why, how it's been rooted out of our consciousness. But it has remained in one way, in place names. There are so many place names in Ireland with the name billa in it, meaning sacred tree or tree that has the potency and the power in it. And what it was every single clan, every single tribe, every single region had its sacred tree. Okay, and they would guard this tree far more passionately and more diligently than even their king, because a king represented maybe 60 years of tradition, but the oak or the ash tree or whatever tree it was, often could be a holly tree as well, or the elm, could be like 400, 600, 8,000 years old, 400, 600 years old, even thousands of years old. It was the keeper of the energy of those people. And all, as I say, the encoded, just like the Aboriginal people have their song lines, that the stories are stitched into the landscape, in particular rocks, in particular trees, in particular rivers, so they never forget. It was the exact same with Ireland. Our stories, each story I could tell you, is rooted to particular glacial formations, particular mountaintops, particular winds, particular wells and trees, so that they can never be forgotten. And so an enemy would come and try and take a branch from the sacred tree, or eventually would topple the tree entirely. Because with that, you could get rid of like hundreds, maybe thousands of years of tradition. And it's interesting, like today in Wales or in Scotland, you can see a few really old trees, which are maybe 3,000 years old. Like where I am, I'm now in Dublin, like 120 miles east of me, I can be in a 3,000-year-old tree in Wales. We have nothing like that in Ireland. We wouldn't, because of course the colonizers knew if they wanted to weaken us, if they wanted to control us, the best way was to cut us off from the root springs of who we are, who we were, our trees. So that they made sure that none of the truly ancient trees survived. But fortunately, they're still there. They're still there in the place names, and they're still there in the folklore. So that's what's happening in Ireland at the moment. There is this growing emergence, this growing realization. Go bhfuil eolas agus tuiscint le stigdar danga, le stigdar bélidas, le stigdar folav. That there is this understanding, this knowledge, this wisdom encoded in the land, in the language, within the mythology. And it's us to go back and reconnect with it. And it can be hard. Like we know, for example, in Roscommon, there is this place I'd always heard about called the Cave of the Female Goddess, or the Cave of the Female Energy. It's called Awi Nagat. And Awi Nagat means either the cave of the cats or of the battles. But it was where Queen Maeve, the great Queen Goddess, Queen Maeve, and the Morrigan. Morrigan is this great bird, powerful goddess who presided over battlefields. It's where she keeps her power. But there were stories that it was where men did rites of passage. If a man wanted to show that we really understood the power of the goddess, the power of the woman, and how to work with her to then succumb and come into his own power, he would go down to that cave. Like we have stories from mythology talking about this. Now I thought, okay, if such a place had existed, it had been long ago forgotten. And I kept on looking in old books and the internet, could never find anything. But of course, it's always been there. And there's been women guardians of place who've always known about it. But in the last 5, maybe 10 years, it's come up to the surface. It's in near Tulsk, County Roscommon. It's called Awi Nagat, and I urge anyone to go there. You need to go to the local visitor centre in Tulsk, and they will guide you there because it's on private land. And it's basically it's a hole. You'd never find it yourself. I had tried every single back boharim, back lane looking for it. I'd never find it. It's just looks like a badger's lair or a fox's den in the wall of a field. You climb into this tiny hole, like 2 foot wide, clamber in, then you go down 40 feet under the ground and you enter this massive chamber, massive sort of, almost a citadel, well, this empty space where the goddess was. We're just knitting these pieces together. We're knitting the knowledge that there was this knowledge about the female body, about female health, about herbs. Like there's a place down the road from me called Lús an Livgurt, and a Fásach a Livgurt means nothing in English. When you understand in Irish, it's Fásach, it's the wilderness of an Livgurt, of the herb garden. So it's the herb garden that went wild. And of course, there was a woman who minded that garden, who knew all of the herbs, who knew all of the remedies that went with them. But that's been forgotten. So we're in a time now where we're trying to find these place names, try and dig up the soil, do pollen tests, try and either both spiritually reconnect these places so that we get a better idea of them, but also do the academic work, do the linguistic work, do the etymological work so that we can bring it all alive. Like there's a really powerful place called Béaloch on the Mriscoin in between Cong and Mayo, near enough to Cong. Béaloch on the Briscoin, again, means nothing if you're speaking in English. You translate it into Irish, Béal on the Briscoin. Béal is the mouth, or Baile, the townland, or the ford of the Briscoin. Briscoin is tansy, this yellow top flower that smells a bit of camphor, but it's vital because during winter, if you're trying to store meat, it'll keep insects away from meat, so it can be really vital. But even more important, it's an abortion. It'll bring on an abortion. So if a woman wants to control her own fertility, if a woman finds she's in a difficult place, as long as she knows there is Briscoin somewhere, she can go at night, get that, and she can take control of her own fertility again. So, like even I often talk about up in County Antrim, there's a place, Baile Fitte Maeve. And again, the local people in Northern Ireland have no idea. What does it mean? It means the Baile Fitte, the townland of the vagina of Maeve, of the queen goddess Maeve. There's a great account of this Maeve, this powerful goddess that is the heart of so many of our stories. Like we always thought that our stories in Ireland were about these warriors, Cuchulainn and Finn McCool. And there are a lot of stories about warriors, but that's a layer put on top of another entire subset of knowledge about women goddesses, women powerful figures, women wise, learned figures. And in fact, all of the stories of Cuchulainn and Finn McCool, these great warriors, if you read them again, they're all about women coming to the men, trying to give them advice or give them guidance, and the men turning away from that, doing the exact opposite and causing ructions and chaos. It's like under our noses, there is this lesson that has been trying to convey to us that there's a more harmonious way of living on this earth, that there's a way that we can be connected to the seasons, to the land, to the river, to the water, to all beings, both human and non-human beings. And it's just waiting to come out to us again. Mar sin beceart dumsa beidir ma béal a hóna feag second agus fechan to Elaine Keshnan. Maybe I should shut my mouth for a little bit and see if there are any questions. And you read me I wasn't reading the things, but we'll see. Maybe Georgie has some questions.
Thank you so much. That was such a deeply enlivening and rooting talk. I'm so moved by all that you shared. So thank you so much. We do indeed have questions coming in. Please do keep them coming in using the Q&A button. The first is a question from Australia that asks how best to reconnect with this deep wateriness and earthiness of these ancient goddess energies.
I give talks a lot in public places, and what I'm amazed is that it's mostly the people who are come are these young women, often in their late 20s and early 30s, and they're so much more in tune with all of this than I am. Like I'm a product of the 1970s. You can look at me. I look like a failed priest. I look like I was a priest every incarnation up until now. I'm the last person really to connect. I do my best to connect with these places. Like last year, I've been working a lot with Native American people, Cree elders in Alberta at the moment, and Jerry Saddleback and Lana Whiskey Jack and Lewis Cardinal, three great elders in Alberta. I asked them that question. And they say to me, Manchán, you just need to go out and sit on the land. That's what we all need to do. And I say to them, yeah, but if I do that, I'm so stuck in my head. I'm so, like my partner, my girlfriend, she's so rooted in the land. I'm stuck in my head. So I said, like, I'll probably come out with bullshit. And I work a lot as well with Tyson Yunkaporte, the great Aboriginal elder who wrote Sand Talk. And what he says is the same. He says the same thing that Jerry Saddleback says over in Alberta. You need to sit on the land. You need to follow your intuition. And you need to understand, first, probably a lot of raw mate, a lot of rubbish, a lot of bullshit will come out. We need to, with humility, bring that back to the collective group and have it whittled down. Like a lot of when we do connect, it will be just egotistical, or it'll be superficial, or it'll be biased by our own jaundiced perspective, or my conditioning. I am such a product of the 1970s and 80s conditioning in Ireland that I don't trust a lot of what I think, a lot of what I get. But I think all of us need to humbly get out into the land and realize the ancestors do wish to speak to us. The water, the trees, the land does wish to speak to us. But it's a really radical idea to get out of the logical brain, the educational brain, and to try and do that. So for all of us, it's a time of vulnerability. And we need to realize that the wisdom, the true knowledge and wisdom will survive. You know, what the things that we get wrong will probably just dismissed. We will be left with egg on our face or a little bit embarrassed. But I think we all need to dare to tap into it and see what we get.
It's very beautiful. Thank you. In a global context, what lessons or insights do you believe Irish mythology and cultural practices can offer to the world in these times?
Yeah, even like a word like Fear Midba. So Fear Midba means, simple word. So, you know, Ireland had a biodiversity. We had a National Assembly. Was it a public assembly on biodiversity? So basically a citizens' assembly, what we call it. All the citizens, we decided we would get 100 or 120 people, representative of all the citizens of Ireland. We would put them in a hotel for a few weekends, and they would talk. They would decide what we were going to do about biodiversity in Ireland. We're having a number of these citizens' assemblies at the moment. It's like it's democracy at its best. Anyway, I was asked to address one of these citizens' assemblies, and I said I just pointed it as Fear Midba. Fear Midba. Fear means man. Mid is the Latin middle, mid, and ba means a tent or a hut. So it's man between huts, okay? And it refers to a young man who's between 14 and 21 years of age. And what it is it means that he wants to become his own. Is that noise in the background getting very loud at the moment? You okay, Georgie?
Yeah,
Seems
it's just about okay.
good. It's visitors' time, and it's hilarious. Who would have thought I was going to be talking to a few hundred people from anyway?
We're your
Um,
visitors.
yeah, far midbox. So it refers to a man who's between 14 and 21. He wants to set up his own family. Okay, so he goes to the chief in the Tuha, in the tribe, and he says to them, I need to set up my own place. And they say, okay, we'll give you some cattle. We'll give you a few head of cattle. And in return, you have to show that you have to look after these cattle. So in the summer, he goes up to the high summer pasture. The boile is the word for that, the high summer pasture. And he looks after those cattle. He needs to protect them from cattle raiders and from wolves, from attacks by wolves. But every night, he needs to collect up the cow dung and carry it down to the winter pastures so that he's making enough soil for those cattle, enough new earth, enough regenerative land so that those cattle would have land in wintertime. And once he's proved to the tribe that not only can he look after cattle, enough cattle to give food, meat, nourishment, ink and skin to his people, but that he can also look after the land and regenerate land, then he is entitled to have his own family. It's a beautiful example of expanding only when you're doing it in an entirely sustainable way. The other example I would give is in Glasgowlan. And every single parish in Ireland has a story about in Glasgowlan or in Glasgowlog. There's different ways of pronouncing that. And we know we had an amazing folklore collection in the 1930s called the Schools Collection. President at the time, Eamon de Valera, and his wife, who was a committed believer in fairies and the power of the land, she convinced her husband to set up a project where every school child in every parish of Ireland was sent out to the oldest people in the land to, it's hilarious how loud this room is getting now, was sent out to the oldest people in the land to try and but George, you do interrupt me and I can find another place. I'll go out into the corridor again if it gets ridiculous. Are you just about hearing me? Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it sounds fine to me. I'm just checking in with others, but for now we're good.
Good. Yeah. So anyway, in 1930s, every child goes to the oldest or the wisest person in their community and gathers up the folk stories. 1937, 38, and 39, and they come back and we have all this folklore. So if any of you have family who was here in 1937, 1938, 39, go and look up. It's all online now. You will find the folklore knowledge of of your ancestors. But anyway, in every parish, there's talk of this Glasgowla, of this magic cow. And what she did was she grazed the land in the community. And you could see she was a magical cow. And you could see where she grazed because she made that land where she grazed more fertile than any other part of the region. Often, in other words, it was down by the river. It was the most fertile area. The place where the people could spot had the most fertility in it. And she was known that she would give milk to every single person in the community, anyone who wanted it. Okay, so she was a metaphor for the bountiness of nature. She was always there giving of herself. And then there's this tragic story told in every community that a foreign man comes in from somewhere else and he claims, I bet you I can beat your cow of absolute fertility, of absolute abundance. Anyway, it gets very sad there, but it gives an example of what happens. And basically, he brings a sieve. The man brings a sieve in that she can't fill, and the cow dies. But it's a message in every single community in Ireland that we needed to look after our natural resources, and that if we didn't, the land would suffer and we would suffer. So there are these little stories that you can find in Ireland, but you can find similar versions in every other part of the world. So I think the key message for Ireland is, and why Native elders in the States, in Canada, and Australia spend so much time with me is because they said, like, you're white, you're in the EU, you have a seat in the UN, but you also have elements of an ancient knowledge that has been kept alive by some way. So we sort of have an onus, we have a responsibility to us in Ireland to reconnect with the language, with the lore, with the landscape, and then to try and find a way to convey that to people beyond Ireland.
Amazing, thank you. Just to say, people are saying it all sounds good. I think Zoom's doing a very good job at blocking out the background noise. But if you're distracted, you might want to move. But for us, it's all good.
Okay, it's hilarious. It's hilarious visiting out in the hospital.
Um, the next question is, how do you think the trauma of colonization has influenced the perception of the Irish regarding their land and culture? And how can we use this understanding to heal and recover lost identities?
Oh, such a beautiful question. And again, it's what I find when I'm working with Native American people, Aboriginal people. The wound is so, so deep. I keep on saying, I really emphasize, I don't think Ireland can call ourselves an Aboriginal people because we have wiped out Aboriginal cultures. Often, when the British brought us to Australia, or when we went out to Argentina because of the famine, we were equally brutal as the British colonizers in these places. So, like, we set up the Indian residential schools in Canada, an Irish person did. The Irish clergy were very involved. So, clearly, we can't equate ourselves. But in terms of the trauma we suffered, there is things that are akin. Like, for me, during the famine, in other words, during the 30s and 1840s, our grandparents and our grandfathers at the time, and like my grandmother, she knew people who were alive during the famine. So it's not too long ago. They knew that our language was going to die, our culture was going to die, the stories that had been handed down, that connection to land was going to die. And so they had to do something. They had to make sure we forgot the language. We went to English. Because even if you wanted to go to work in Dublin or Kenny or Cork, but definitely in London or Liverpool or America or Sydney, you needed to forget everything about Irish culture and just embrace English language and English lore. So that was a remarkable trauma. It was a huge trauma that a culture, as I said, that had knowledge going back possibly to glacial times, possibly 10,000 years, had to be stopped because if not, none of us was going to survive. So the hope that our grandparents made back then, that our forebears, was if we managed to learn English, get out of Ireland, survive, then maybe we could bring strands of our knowledge back and reanimate the land again. But so it was an amazing act of bravery. And so now but because we haven't dealt with that, because we haven't dealt with that trauma, people have this block. Like, people can't learn the Irish language. Irish people jeer. We laugh at our stories. We laugh at the notion of the leprechaun. But you remember, as I said, that school's collection, 1937, 38, 39, in every single parish, in every single townland in Ireland, there was references to the leprechaun. The leprechaun was a real being. This idea of counter agus alter. Counter in Irish means a region or a place. Alter means the other world, the netherworld, the place beyond. It was absolutely natural to all of our ancestors going back thousands of years to believe that there was this existence here. But right beside us, right between us, right beneath us was the other world. And unfortunately, we now have this sense of shame, of backwardness, of disgust about our language, about the mythology. So there's a key lesson for us first to get over that trauma. Because when you think of Irish people, what do you think? You sort of think of alcohol. When Irish people, when they drink, they say sláinte. There's cheers. Sláinte means health, your health. Basically, we're trying to re-find our health through alcohol, which we can never do. So there's a big load of work for Ireland people to do to address that trauma of almost being wiped out, of the shame, of the poverty, of the just having your culture eliminated. But we need to do it really quickly so that we aren't a traumatized people, so that we are a people who have addressed that trauma and then are empowered and emboldened and proud that actually, despite everything, so much of our culture is still there. And it is shouting, it's screaming at us to refine ourselves refine it inside of ourselves, and then to make it universal. There's nothing unique about Ireland. This type of knowledge was connected to every single rooted people. It was just as much a part of England as Ireland. But as I said, we were blessed in some way because we didn't have industry, because we didn't have wealth, because we didn't have coal. We managed to keep some of these old ways of thinking, at least until the 30s, 40s, 50s, even to some degree. I remember the 1970s in West Kerry, there was a lot in it, thank God. There was a lot of this sense of the spirit world, the other world. And this, there was a hill above us, Clough Brean on a mountain. And it was the living place of Crom Dove, of a pagan god. When we used to sneeze, Dan Kerry would say, Dealing, God be with you. But just north, just across the border in Clare, they say Deschel when you sneeze. Deschel means sunwise. Basically, it's invoking the power of the sun god. So in spite of everything, we kept this pagan knowledge, this knowledge how everything is entwined. We are part of the water, part of the tree, part of the stars, the ocean, the cosmos, and all of the multitude of dimensions that are around us. So there's trauma there, but it behoves us to somehow reconnect to it.
Thank you. And you've spoken to this a little, but when one turns to learn the language of their land, be that Welsh or Irish or Scottish or Cornish or whatever it may be, how do you think that can influence that person's relationship with the land and with the history of the land?
Yeah. First off, I don't think it's necessary to learn fluency in a language. There's different ways. So luckily, because I spent a quarter of my life in West Kerry in the Gaeltacht, that I was immersed in the Gaeltacht, in other words, the Irish speaking, the Irish world, which is so much more than just language. It's so much more than just vocab and grammar and words. It's a mindset. Now that's impossible. It's very, very hard to get an entire mindset like the Gaeltacht would give us. So the alternative, the Irish language is thriving in cities in Ireland, but it's a very different thing from the language that is rooted in the land, in the rivers, in the goddesses that is in the Gaeltacht. But it's another thing again, if we want to just get a mouthfeel for some words, I think that can spark a huge amount inside of us. And so we run this online course called Skull Scarta. So an immersion in the Irish language, but in a more broader, not looking at grammar, it's the feelings, it's the mindset of Irish. And what people say when they do it is even just saying a few words, make them think different, make them see things different, make them feel different in their body. It's hard for me to speak exactly to that because I had Irish before I had English, so it's hard. But I do believe that it's impractical to expect people now to learn an entire new language that is spoken by so few people. But I think by connecting with an old language, even in a minor way, we manage to just see beyond the strictures, the confining nature of a modern, Western, practical, utilitarian language like English or German or French, which are incredibly rich languages, but they just are different from a truly ancient language.
Thank you. And can you speak to your journey into, were you always deeply immersed in Irish culture and heritage and myth, or was there a kind of point in your life where you turned more towards that?
Yeah. So I was born in 1970, okay? But the most important person in my life was my grandmother, Sheila Humphreys. She was born in 1899. And the most important person in her life was her uncle, The O'Rahilly. The O'Rahilly was my great-granduncle. The as in T-H-E, because he was the head of the O'Rahilly chiefdom or tribe. And he believed in about 1910 or 1912 that it was time they needed to have a revolution against Britain. They needed to start a revolution and they needed to create an organization, a cultural organization. So he was one of the founders of Conor na Gaeilge, or the Gaelic League, which began the revival of cultural language, literature, oral stories. They began to record as much as they can to translate from ancient Irish into English, the old lore. And he also founded the Irish Volunteers, which became the IRA. He founded the army. He had a lot of money. He had a pub in West Kerry. Someone earned a lot of money and put all the money into buying all the guns for the Easter Rising in 1916. So, of course, the British were not going to allow him to survive. So on Easter Monday, 1916, the Easter Rising, he dresses in his finest Irish tweed. He gets ready to go down to the GPO, the General Post Office, which was going to be the center of the uprising. And he says goodbye to his 4 children and his pregnant wife, knowing that he'd never see them again in 1916. Okay. So for my grandmother, that was the most important day in her life. Her beloved uncle was sacrificing himself for Irish language, for Irish lore, for Irish culture, and for Irish land. So she then devoted her life to the same thing. She did 3 years in and out of prison. She did 32 days on a hunger strike at one point. She never spoke a word of English if she could possibly do it, much to my embarrassment growing up in the 70s in Dublin. She would never speak a word of English to anybody. They were important, but the reason they were doing what they were doing was because of the O'Rahilly, my great-granduncle. His great-granduncle was called Aegon O'Rahilly, and he was the last of the old Bardic poets, the poets of the old Bardic school. In other words, when St. Patrick came, the Druids were in charge. And St. Patrick said, look, we can't have Druids anymore, but the Druids can keep their poetic side, but just their spiritual side, their power, their magic side is going to go to the saints. So the Druids, the poets took over the Druidic powers, which is why, when you think of Ireland, you think of Yeats, you think of Heaney. Our poets were really important because they were way more than just wordsmiths. They were keepers of lore. They were keepers of knowledge. So Egan O'Reilly, my great-granduncle, 4 generations back, he was entitled to wear a cloak of crimson bird feathers. Okay, he's entitled because of his high role as an Olaf, a great seer. So imagine that, a cloak of crimson bird feathers. Basically, he was a pagan. It was a pagan symbol. He was tapping into pure druidism. So when he died, an entire Gaelic, an entire Celtic way of looking at the world died with him. Fortunately, his poems all exist. But that's what sparked my great granduncle, Theo O'Reilly, to sacrifice his life to set up the army. That's what sparked my grandmother. And so I come along in 1970, my granny just sparks me. And so I spend my whole time doing, following that, only speaking Irish at house, never listening to English until I was older. But then in the 80s, she was still fighting. The O'Reilly was sort of a pacifist. My granny was a terrier. So she was up in Belfast fighting with the IRA, with the H Block. And that disgusted me. I decided, no, I want nothing to do with this violence. So I went off and learned French and German and Spanish and went off traveling in Africa, in South America, in India, hunting out minority cultures wherever I could find, seeing their culture. And eventually, I suppose after about 15 years of doing that, I thought, no, I need to go back to Ireland and reconnect with my own culture in an entirely new way, not in a violent way, not in a way like for my grandmother, where every word of Irish was aimed at Britain. I adored Britain. Britain gave me my greatest education, the Observer, the Guardian, the BBC. So that's how I ended up with the perspective. I'd spent 20 years working with cultures around the world, making travel documentaries about them, writing travel books, and came home to Ireland and realized there is just as much and more culture here as there is anywhere else.
Wow, what a lineage. That's so incredible. Thank you so much for sharing those stories. You spoke to getting out of one's head and into the body and into the intuition and listening to the land. And I wondered if you could share, if you have an experience or two that has kind of come through learning to listen to the land speak and deepening your relationship with the land.
Yeah. And as we know, up in Scotland, there are amazing passage tombs as well, or these passage graves, or these ritual sites, ceremonial sites. And I would urge anybody to try and get to one of these sites and to chant in them, to either make up sounds or like the Cailleach Beira herself, this wise witch, we know some of the words she was saying. And I find when I go into these spaces, I just immediately get transformed. I'm thinking that a lot of these underground passageways and tombs and spaces were maybe constructed in a way that there would be these harmonics or these frequencies that would make one think, that would open one's mind in different ways. They definitely have a profound effect on me anytime I do that. So we're fortunate, like at least in Scotland and in Wales, try English, into the British countryside and Ireland, there are these stone circles, these stone sites, these temples that when we go into and when we chant, for me anyway, I suddenly begin to see things and feel things in different ways. So that'd be my main way of connecting. Or just any, and it's everyone has a different intuition going, but like if I find a stone circle or a chamber or a fairy ring, or even one of the ancient trees, and I don't touch the tree, but if I just put my hand near the tree, maybe I should be locked up, but I feel things, I see things, I sense things. I do believe they want us to connect with them. And I do believe it's hard, but it's not impossible. And I think that just when I see the young people who are following me on Instagram and different things at the moment, they seem to be more open. They seem to have less films, less layers, less armor than any other generation before them. So I think we can learn so much from them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Someone's written, do you have any resources for the words used by the Cailleach?
By the Cailleach, there's a few in my book in 32 Words for Field, but there's some great, if they look up the Cailleach, there's so much great things written on the Cailleach. Like her original poems are online. They would have been original Old Irish and Middle Irish versions, but then they're translated into English. Can I think of when I have to stop? No, but where did I go? I started TikTok about 2 months ago, and I think about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I actually I chanted. I made this little video of some of the Cailleach's words. And I hope I left a reference in the TikTok at Manchán Magan. But they will, if they have a route around the internet, they will definitely find her poems, where she just goes, she talks about her power long ago and how she is now in a weakened state. There's a gorgeous Loch Gur. There's a place in Limerick that I'd urge people to go. It's called Loch Gur, and Gur means incubation. So Ton Kakar Gur, the hen is sitting on her eggs. So it's like a lake of incubation. When I heard that, I thought, okay, there must be something going on here. And it's to do with another goddess, goddess Anya, which is the goddess of brightness. Basically, she's the goddess of Munster, of the south of Ireland. Because when that sun came up and melted the glacial ice sheet, she came from the south, from the equator up. And so that's where the brightness was. That's where the warmth, and that's where this goddess is. And there's a great story. That lake, that is the manifestation of the goddess, the lake disappears entirely every 7 years. And all is left is a tree, is one single leafless stalk of a tree. And covered over it is a green mantle, is a green blanket. Okay. Now, blankets and mantles in Ireland were always about ways of getting from one world to the other world. You covered yourself in a blanket, just like when a child, you put them in their blanket and they don't know where they are. It's the same in Irish mythology. And so there's a story that the most powerful lake in Ireland, Loch Gur, disappears. You just have a basin, an empty basin, a tree with no leaves, a green blanket, and an ancient old woman knitting beneath the tree. And so a man comes, an arrogant, cocky young man on a horse, and he tries to steal the green blanket, which is a valuable thing, from the Cailleach, from this old spent hag of a woman. And immediately she rises up with all of her power, with every inch of power, and she shouts out this thing, Chod a voine valav, marka ho hirna man marav, a fodachan vrat oinem. So, Chod a voine valav, Chod, to you, O voine valav, O whelp, O dumb whelp, marka ho hirna man marav, you rider from the land of the dead woman, O odachan vrat who tried to steal the green cloak, or the cloak from my hands. And what this is showing us is, no matter how spent, no matter how withered the Cailleach is, the witch is, she has all the power of the world within her. The Cailleach is a symbol, particularly in Scotland. The Cailleach brings in winter. It brings in the destruction, where all the leaves, all the greenness, all the life goes. With her cudgel or with her broomstick, she beats it all back. But then on the 1st of February, she becomes the life force of Bridget again. She becomes the new life. It is not yes, black or white. It is not yes, and it is everything. She is the old witch that brings in destruction. She is the new seed of new life, and then she is the full flowering of summer. She is everything. So it's such a mindset, and there are beautiful poems that you'll find online that encapture all of that. Like, these are 8th, 9th, 10th century poems. Some of them are translated by James Murphy, some by Robin Evans, but you'll find them. Yeah.
Malcolm, thank you so much for all that you've shared here today, the incredible stories and inspiration and connection with the land and the myth and the language. And we're just so grateful for you showing up, even though it turned out that you're going to be in hospital at this time. Yeah, really.
Yeah,
so humbling to have you join us like this. So thank you so much for your passion and your commitment to this work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, George. It was a pleasure. See you again.
Thank you very much. And before we say goodbye, I'll just tell you about 3 upcoming events that may interest you. We have the next Resurgence Talk is with Melissa Glackick, who will be speaking about Heartwood, sharing insights into environmental education. I'll be leading an autumn equinox celebration online in September, when we'll celebrate that ancient festival. And we also have the Festival of Wellbeing in October, when we'll be joined by Robin Moore-Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass and Gathering Moss, as well as Gillian Burke and many more. So we really hope that you'll join us then. We've shared links to Manchán's TikTok and Instagram and his website. There's wonderful comments coming through, and thanking you so much for joining us from hospital. And someone was saying, you talked about these things being passed from lap to lap, and what incredible lineage of laps that you come from. So yes, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for being here today.